Many officers are hardworking, technically competent, and genuinely care about their crew. Yet, despite having a good intentions, some still struggles as leaders. Today, we will discuss why good officers sometimes fail and what we can learn from these situations. This episode is not about criticizing officers. It is about understanding the leadership gaps that often prevent capable officers from reaching their full potential. Many officers believe that if they work hard, perform well, and become technically competent, leadership will naturally follow. When I was a second officer, I once worked with a chief officer who was highly competent. He managed the cargo operations efficiently, maintained excellent documentation, and was one of the hardest working officers I had encountered. From my perspective, it was clear that he aspired to become a master someday. Over time, however, I began to realize that technical competence alone may not be enough to advance into a leadership positions. While he possessed strong operational skills, there were areas of leadership that seems less developed. This experience taught me an important lesson. Leadership requires a different set of skills. An officer can be an excellent navigator, cargo officer, or engineer and still face challenges when it comes to leading people. Technical expertise is essential, but effective leadership also requires communication, emotional intelligence, decision-making, relationship building, and the ability to inspire and develop others. Unlike technical skills, leadership does not develop automatically through experience alone. It must be learned, practiced, and developed intentionally. One of the most common reasons good officers fail is because they become overly focused on tasks. Cargo operations, maintenance schedules, inspections, audits, and paperwork demand constant attention. Eventually, people become secondary. The vessel may operate efficiently, but the crew morale begins to decline. Great officers understand that ships are operated by people, not by checklists. For example, when I was a chief officer, I once sailed with a master who was exceptionally organized and technically competent. Every operation was carefully planned and tasks were executed efficiently and successfully. However, despite his strong operational skills and abilities, he rarely checked on his crew and seldom took the time to understand how they were coping with the workload and daily challenges on board. Over time, the crew became less willing to approach him with concerns. Communications gradually diminished, and important issues were often kept at the departmental level rather than being openly discussed with the master. Operationally, he was successful, yet as a leader, he was slowly losing the trust and confidence of his team. One of the hidden dangers at these situations is that safety concerns may be unreported. Deficiencies in safety equipment, operational risk, or human factor issues can remain unresolved when officers and crew members become hesitant to raise their concerns because they fear they will not be heard by their leader. They will not be understood or supported by their master. A ship can operate efficiently for a period of time, but long-term safety depends on open communications and trust. Leadership is not about managing operations. It is also about creating an environment where people feel valued, heard, and confident enough to raise concerns that matter. Experience is valuable, but can also become dangerous when it creates overconfidence. Some officers reach a point where they stop listening because they believe they already know the answer. The problem is that ideas can come from anyone on board, regardless of rank. When leaders stop listening, they stop learning. For example, I once witnessed an experienced chief engineer troubleshooting a malfunctioned lifeboat engine together with the second engineer. During the process, The second engineer suggested a possible solution based on his observations and experience. However, the suggestion was quickly dismissed. Whether intentionally or not, it appeared that the idea received little considerations because it came from a subordinate. After several unsuccessful attempts, the chief engineer was still unable to start the engine. Eventually, the second engineer was given the opportunity to carry out his proposed solution, and the engine was successfully started. This experience reinforced an important leadership lesson for me. Good ideas are not determined by rank. Valuable insights may come from anyone on board, regardless of their positions, age, sex, or experience level. When leaders stop listening because of hierarchy, they risk overlooking information that could solve problems, improve safety, or prevent incidents. The second engineer's concern was valid, but it was initially ignored because of where it came from rather than what it contained. Leadership begins to fail when rank becomes more important than wisdom. The most effective leaders are not those who always have the answers. They are the ones who are willing to listen. Ships are multicultural workplaces. The same leadership approach will not work with every crew member. Good officers sometimes fail because they use the same approach for everyone. Effective leaders adjust their communications and leadership styles based on the situations and the people involved. In the maritime industry, working on a multicultural crew is normal. One important aspect of leadership in multicultural environment is recognizing that people do not always interpret feedback in the same way. For some nationalities, feedback is viewed as a professional tool for learning and improving performance. For others, the same feedback may be perceived as criticism or personal disapproval, especially if it is delivered publicly or too directly. Leaders must be aware of these differences. The objective is not only to give feedback but also to ensure that it is received in a way it was intended. In multicultural crews, effective leaders communicate with respect, empathy, and cultural awareness. They focus on helping people improve rather than making them feel criticized. Good leadership is not just about what you say. It is about how your message is received. Many officers dislike confrontations. They want harmony on board. But avoiding difficult conversations often creates bigger problems later. Leadership requires the courage to address issues early and professionally. For example, during cargo operations, there is a crew members repeatedly arrive late for watch handovers. The officer avoided addressing it because he didn't want conflict. Weeks later, the issue became a major source of frustrations throughout the department. Some officers believe that doing everything themselves guarantees quality. But in reality, it often leads to exhaustion and efficiency. Delegation is not weakness. Delegation is leadership. For example, when I was a chief officer, I once worked with a master who wanted to be involved almost every task on board. No matter how small the issue was, officers and crew would wait for his approval before taking actions. At first, this approach seemed effective because he maintained close control over operations. However, over time, the officers became hesitant to make decisions on their own. Instead of developing confidence and initiative, they became dependent on the master for even routine matters. As the workload increased, the master became overwhelmed with countless small decisions. Simple tasks were delayed because everyone was waiting for his instructions, even when they were fully capable of handling the situations themselves. This experience taught me that leadership is not about doing everything yourself. It is about developing people, trusting them with responsibility, and creating a team that can perform effectively even when the leader is not present. A leader's success is not measured by how much work they do personally, but by how capable their team become under their leadership. Leadership is often tested during difficult moments. Good officers sometimes fail because stress changes how they behave. They become impatient, short-tempered, or emotionally reactive. The crew notice these changes immediately. The crew is very observant. For example, I once worked with a chief engineer who was known for being approachable, kind, and deeply religious person. Under normal circumstances, he treated everyone with respect and maintained good relationships with the engine crew department. However, during a particular challenging inspections, the pressure began to affect his behavior. As deficiencies were identified and questions from the inspectors increased, he became visibly frustrated. Instead of focusing on solutions, he started blaming his subordinates for issues that arose and became noticeably short-tempered during the discussions. The inspections was eventually completed successfully, and the technical issues were addressed. However, the impact on the team lasted much longer. Some crew members become reluctant to approach him with concerns, while others felt less confident and less motivated. This experience reminded me that leadership is often tested not during routine operations, but during moments of pressure and uncertainty. Crew members closely observe how leaders respond when things do not go according to plan. A calm leader creates confidence. An emotionally reactive leader can unintentionally create fear, hesitations, and mistrust. The inspections may last only a few days, but the way a leader behaves during those moments can influence the team morale for months or even the whole contract. The maritime industry changes constantly. Technology changes, regulation changes, people change. Officers who stop learning eventually fall behind. For example, I once worked with a very experienced second officer who had spent many years at sea and possessed excellent knowledge of traditional navigation methods. He was highly respected for his experience and had developed strong skills using paper charts. However, when the industry transitioned from paper charts to ICDIS, he struggled to adapt. He was very uncomfortable with the new technology and often expressed his preferences for the old way of doing things. Later, when the company introduced digital reporting system, he again resisted a change and continued to rely on familiar methods whenever possible. While other officers invested time in learning the new system and gradually became more confident, he became increasingly frustrated. Tasks that once seemed simple became more challenging to him, and his reluctance to adapt affected both his efficiency and confidence. Eventually, he chose to retire earlier than expected. This experience taught me that experience alone is not enough to remain effective in a rapidly changing industry. The maritime profession continues to evolve through new technologies, regulations, and operational practices. The most successful officers are not necessarily those who know the most today, but those who remain willing to learn tomorrow. Leadership requires continuous learning. The moment we stop learning, we eventually stop growing. One of the biggest traps in leadership is believing that rank alone is enough. Crew members may obey because they must, but genuine leadership occurs when people choose to follow. An officer constantly reminded the crew of his rank whenever disagreements occurred. Eventually, people stopped offering suggestions. The officers still stand authority, but no longer had influence. The best officers are not perfect. They make mistakes like everyone else. The difference is that they learn from those mistakes. They remain students of leadership throughout their careers. Leadership is a journey, not a destination. No matter our rank, experience, or years at sea, there is always something new to learn. The goal is not to become a perfect officer. The goal is to become a better leader than we were yesterday. Because in the end, people rarely remember how much we know. They remember how we led them.